After Merab's win at UFC 311, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not he is the bantamweight GOAT. I think there's certainly a case to be made for Merab, but I also think bantamweight is a unique example of a weight class where you could make a case for, three, maybe even four guys to actually hold that title. Typically, when you're looking at the GOAT of a weight class, you're talking about two, maybe at most three guys. But like I said, I do think there are four fighters you can make a case for here at 135. So I'm going to be breaking down the UFC careers of all the top contenders to be the bantamweight GOAT, and then hopefully that helps us kind of figure out who the true bantamweight GOAT is at this point here. So I'm going to start off by just mentioning the four fighters that I will be considering. Obviously Merab, who I mentioned, Aljamain Sterling, TJ Dillashaw, and then Dominic Cruz. In my opinion, those would be the top four. But I'll also just run through some honorable mentions here. I think Renan Barão has to get a mention, has 4 title wins, was 9-0 in his first 9 WEC/UFC fights. Also went on a 32-fight win streak, which is just insane. I think the problem for Barão is that he never beat Dominic Cruz to become the champion, and then when another all-time great bantamweight came by, TJ Dillashaw, that's who he eventually lost the belt to, and then just really had a steep fall off. So really just the quality of wins I don't think was quite there. Then we have Henry Cejudo, who has 2 title wins at bantamweight. I just don't think he spent enough time in the weight class. Also, in terms of his title wins, they are kind of weaker. An older Dominic Cruz and then Marlon Moraes, who went on a steep fall off. I think after he defended the belt against Cruz, if he stuck around, he could have made a strong case for himself. But unfortunately, he retired, and then when he's returned, he just hasn't looked like the same guy. And then another honorable mention goes to Petr Yan. He has 2 title wins. He's 10-4 in the UFC. The problem is his losses have come to, 3 bantamweight champions, Merab, O'Malley, Aljo. If he was picking up 1, maybe 2 wins out of those, I think he'd have a stronger case. But at this point, I don't see how you put him in the top 4. Now, looking at the potential contenders here, we'll start off with Merab, the current active champion. He only has 2 title wins, which doesn't quite line up with some of these other champs, but I think he can make up for it in some other ways. So he has 11 wins at bantamweight that is tied for 5th most in the weight class. He is on an 11-fight win streak, 12-fight win streak, but 11 of those at bantamweight. That is actually the longest streak ever at bantamweight, so he holds the crown there. He's also the all-time UFC leader in takedowns, just past GSP in the Umar fight. And then when you look at his quality of competition, he has some legit wins on his resume. Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley, Henry Cejudo, Umar Nurmagomedov, Jose Aldo. That is 4 former champions, and then I think Umar will be the champ at some point. So 4 former, 1 potential future champ, all in a row, just a murderer's row that he has gone up against. So even though he doesn't have an insane number of title wins, I think when you look at the Petr Yan, Henry Cejudo matchups, those are easily title caliber competition. And he also just had to go through so much to get that title shot. Like some of these other guys just had way shorter paths to the belt. He had to beat, 2 or 3 former champions to even get a shot at the title. So I do think that should get factored in. I think it's somewhat controversial on whether or not finishes against this top competition really matter. If you're winning the fight clearly, does it matter if you're getting a finish? If you wanted to ding him for that, he has 0 finishes against this top competition, but he's still winning these fights pretty clearly. Merab's also obviously still the reigning champion, so he still has a lot of time and will likely continue to build his legacy here at 135. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about and consider to be the bantamweight GOAT is Aljamain Sterling. Merab actually even said after his fight that he thought Sterling was the bantamweight GOAT. Obviously, they're friends, teammates, so he's kind of putting his guy over, but Aljo's in the mix here. He is tied for the 2nd most title wins with 4. He actually has the most wins at bantamweight at 14. He is the 2nd longest winning streak at 9. And you look at some of his top wins here, 2 wins technically against Petr Yan. 1 was the DQ, so we'll go with 1 win against Petr Yan, a win against TJ Dillashaw, Henry Cejudo, and then Corey Sandhagen. Maybe you don't consider that to be an elite win, but I think it's just the way he did it, right? Subbed him in under a minute 30. I think that's what makes it an insanely impressive win. I guess the issue here for Aljo was that on paper, the names look good, right? Yan, Dillashaw, Cejudo, that is really solid competition, but it's the way he's won those fights that haven't been super dominant. They haven't been super clean. Some have been, just the performances. Others really have not been his fault. When you look at the 2 Yan fights, the first one, obviously, he wins the belt via disqualification. Looked like he was on his way to losing that one. The second one was a split decision. I think it's totally fair that he won, but still a very competitive fight. Then the TJ Dillashaw, not his fault. TJ came in injured, dislocated his shoulder. I know it puts somewhat of an asterisk on it for some people. Personally, like I'm not going to ding him for it because it's not his fault, but is important to mention. And then his final title win, Henry Cejudo, another very, very close split decision. Now, moving over to the next contender here, we have TJ Dillashaw. He actually leads all bantamweights in title wins with 5. He has the second most wins at 13. He's also second in finishes with 8. And then he leads the bantamweight division with 7 KO wins. When we're looking at his biggest wins, he has 2 victories over Renan Barão. He has 2 wins over Cody Garbrandt. I also threw Rafael Assunção in here. Some people might see that, might not be super familiar with him. If you kind of tuned in later to the UFC, he was towards the end of his career. But when TJ beat Assunção, he was in the middle of a crazy run. So he was on a 7-fight win streak in the UFC when he faced off against TJ. TJ beat him, then he went on to win 4 more. So without that TJ loss, like that was on his way to be an 11-fight win streak. I think that is a very high-level win that, maybe is something that gets kind of slept on here. Another very notable thing about TJ is that he finished all 5 of his title wins. So not only is he leading the bantamweight in terms of title wins, but he finished all 5 of them, which is very, very impressive and something that these other guys cannot really point to. Also has some solid wins against Sanhagen. Controversial, but whatever. And then Lineker also. I'll also mention the razor close loss to Dominic Cruz. I really think it was a fight that could have gone either way. Both guys had a case to win. Dominic Cruz ended up getting the nod on the judges' scorecards. I think the big issue here for TJ, kind of the elephant in the room, is just the fact that he popped for EPO when he went down at 125. I think there's a lot of ways we can view this because he never actually tested positive at bantamweight, so should that affect his standing as the bantamweight GOAT? It's something I'll kind of dive into a little bit deeper later on, but that's kind of the potential issue here for TJ when it comes to his case. And then the final guy here, who I think also has a very strong claim, is Dominic Cruz. He is tied for second with 4 title wins. He also had 3 WEC title wins, so do we count that? Do we include those? I guess it's kind of up for interpretation again. His top wins were TJ Dillashaw, that very close fight, beat Demetrius Johnson, even though it was Mighty Mouse up a weight class, super undersized. I mean, beating Mighty Mouse is still beating Mighty Mouse. It's very impressive. And then also 2 wins over Uriah Faber. From 2011 through 2025, he only fought 10 times. He is booked for his 11th in February, but it really has just been injuries that have kind of held him back. I think if he wasn't hit with so many like brutal injuries and these long layoffs, he would be just by far and away the bantamweight GOAT. He has had 2 separate 3-year injury layoffs. I'm pretty sure he's coming close to another one here if he didn't take the Rob Font fight. So unfortunately, just large chunks of his career have kind of just gone missing based on the different injuries he suffered. Now, here are some of my big takeaways from all the information I've just laid out. So I'm going to start off by ruling out Aljo to be the bantamweight GOAT. I just think when you're looking at his wins, I think the quality is pretty similar to the other 3 guys. I just think he did it in less dominant and clear fashion, so it's tough for me to give him the edge. So I'm going to be ruling out Aljo. Obviously a great career. I think he is criminally underrated, and I think he is overhated by the MMA fan base. I just don't think he is the bantamweight GOAT. Then I think the question we have to ask ourselves here is, does TJ Dillashaw get ruled out? And kind of what I mentioned, right? He tested positive down at flyweight. This might be a tangent, a topic for another video, but I think it's very interesting the way Dillashaw gets treated for his positive test. Because I think out of all the, fighters, some elite fighters who have tested positive for steroids, PEDs, whatever it is, I feel like TJ gets the most criticism for it, despite him potentially having the best reason, right? Like, he never popped at 135. The reason why he popped at 125 was because he was physically dying to make the weight and needed to train to be able to cut down to 125. Not excusing it, but he also came out he copped to it once they, caught him. He wasn't trying to make all these excuses like some guys still make to this day. So I think it's interesting that he gets so much criticism there. But then it's just going to be personal preference. Do you carry that up to 135? My kind of philosophy is, I feel like testing positive for steroids takes you out of being in the GOAT conversation. For me, I do not consider John Jones the GOAT because of those positive tests. I just don't think it's fair to guys like GSP, Demetrius Johnson, who knows what their careers would have looked like if they were on steroids, right? They could have just been annihilated in the competition. So I don't think it's fair to give the edge in the overall GOAT debate, but I am willing to give guys the divisional GOAT title if they tested positive. Like, I still think John Jones is the light heavyweight GOAT. Anderson Silva, for me, would be the middleweight GOAT. So that's my philosophy. I don't think TJ gets ruled out, but I would be willing to rule him out just based on like how close it is between these guys. So if that's going to be like the deciding factor, I don't hate kind of taking him out of contention here. So at this point, we're sitting at Merab versus Dom Cruz. And right now, I'm inclined to favor Dominic Cruz. I think you look at what he did from 2010 through 2016. He went undefeated 8-0 in 7 title fights and then 1 number 1 contender matchup. The dude was unbeatable, even with the layoff in there. He was still just at the top for so long. I do think Merab is very, very close. He has had, insanely high quality of competition. I think if Merab can pick up 1, maybe 2 more wins, I would have him at the top. But right now, I do slightly favor Dom Cruz. I think you look at the longevity, the fact that he was able to take these layoffs and still come back, get to the title, even at this point, right? Like the fact that he is still competitive against some of the top bantamweights is super impressive given everything he's been through, how long he has been in the sport for. So right now, Dominic Cruz is my bantamweight GOAT, but I would not be shocked with 1, 2 definitely, more wins from Merab that I would pivot and give him that title. So let me know your guys' thoughts. Who do you have as the bantamweight GOAT? Would love to hear it down below. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.